Alright, I'm going to now address another very common fallacy. Perhaps this one is just as common or more commonly used than the ad hom fallacy, and that is the straw man fallacy. And this is where you try to give the impression that you've refuted an argument. Meanwhile, the proper idea of argument that you're discussing was not actually addressed or refuted. So essentially what you're doing is you're attacking a fake argument that your opponent didn't make. You're putting words in their mouth, you are distorting and misrepresenting your opponent's position. And this is very convenient and tempting for many reasons. One thing is that what you're doing is you're trying to make your opponent's position seem more extreme than it is. More black and white, less nuanced. That way, instead of having to actually argue against a nuanced position that probably has some degree of validity, you can then attack something that seems so extreme and absurd that is easier to refute, that you don't even have to give any credibility to it as being even remotely plausible as a logical or meaningful position to hold. An example of this could be someone says, I don't think anyone should be put in jail for possessing marijuana. And then the opponent could say, well, drugs are bad. Have you seen what drugs do to people's lives? You're saying, do you even want 10-year-olds? You're saying you want 10-year-olds to smoke weed. What do you think will happen if we live in a society where 10-year-olds are smoking weed all the time? So what you have there is someone's original position, which was simply that they don't believe people should go to jail for having marijuana, and the opponent is then painting a picture where this person is saying that they believe all drugs should be legal and that even 10-year-olds should be able to smoke weed. Now, at the same time, it's important to be aware that it is possible that one position could lead to another position. So someone's opinion on drugs, let's say your opinion is that you think weed should be legal, it is possible that there could be future ramifications. So it could lead to other unintended consequences. It could lead to other policy positions or shifts in the culture, or it could lead to a variety of things that then the proponent of legalizing marijuana may eventually have to defend. But the conversation or the debate has to get to that point where the opponent is then giving evidence as to why that position could lead elsewhere and actually address the original person's argument before jumping to a different direction. So it is possible that being in favor of legalizing weed could lead to other consequences. But it's on the opponent to provide some sort of evidence or justification on why it would lead to that before they can instantly put a false position on their opponent. Because it is possible that the opponent says, yes, I understand that there will be certain things that might come from legalizing weed, and while I hope that this and this won't happen so much, or that we should take certain measures to limit those negative effects, overall I still think it's better than people being in jail for drug use. See, there's nuance there. It's not just black and white. It's that, yes, I'm against people going to jail for this, but it doesn't mean that I think 5-year-olds should be smoking weed. Maybe I think it's the responsibility of parents to do that, or maybe I think that you should have to be a certain age, and if you smoke weed before a certain age, that you receive a fine or some other punishment aside from jail time. Or maybe there shouldn't be punishment, that you should go to rehab. There's a different angles that someone could take. But the straw man is when you quickly jump on the opponent's position and you instantly distort it and try to misrepresent what they're saying. This happens a lot in this society in a variety of contexts, but especially in the context of texting. I would recommend that you never have serious discussions in text unless for some reason there's just no other way around it, that you can't think of an alternative. No serious discussion should happen in text unless it's absolutely necessary. And the reason why this happens so much in text is that a lot of our positions are nuanced, and when someone quickly distorts our argument, we might lose patience or not have the desire to put in the effort to fully explain our nuanced position. And what happens is both people in a debate or talking about a serious issue are giving short versions of their positions, which in themselves might actually present a straw man version of their own perspective to begin with. They might be presenting a straw man of their own argument in a sense, because they're having to shorten their full position, which then distorts the message. And this is why, if you're having a meaningful conversation with someone that could have any sort of serious ramifications for your relationship with someone, it's best to avoid having those conversations in text if possible. And I would even recommend, if you have struggled to communicate with someone in person, someone you value that's important to your life, whether it's a friend, family member, romantic partner, and this person seems to consistently present a straw man for your arguments, for your points, I think there are two options in particular that are good to use. One is you can have a conversation with them as calmly as you're able to explain that they're misrepresenting your positions and that perhaps you're misrepresenting theirs sometimes. And so what you can do is, let's figure out a way we can communicate in a way that we actually try to genuinely understand each other, that we try to understand in the best possible light, give the most amount of credibility to each other's positions. And then we can have a discussion or even a debate from there. But let's try to present each other's arguments in the best possible light. And I think intelligent people often do this when they're having any sort of debate. That way, when you dismantle someone's point or argument, if that is your objective, or your objective is at least to point out the weaknesses in what they're saying, you've really come from a much stronger position ultimately when you've truly addressed their position with the most amount of respect possible without distorting it. But for a lot of people, when it comes to politics or other avenues of debate, it is true they might be swept away with emotion, and it doesn't have to do with who's making the best arguments. It's who's putting on the best show. They might not care if someone's using straw man arguments or ad hom attacks and so on. But I think when it comes to truly respectable intellectual debate where you're trying to actually get to some sort of truth, beyond just winning, there is value in presenting your opponent's argument with the most respect possible. Now, if someone is unwilling to try to understand you in a friendship or romantic dynamic, and no matter what, it seems to be that they're still stuck on distorting your argument, if you're still set on maintaining this relationship with this person and trying to work through this problem, I would recommend that people sometimes write a letter, type up a note to a partner. Now, it is possible that even with a fully typed up argument or sharing your opinion and perspective, it could still be distorted. They could still choose to ignore what you've said if that's their tendency, if that's part of their way of being in the world. But at least it gives you the chance to fully get your opinion out there without being interrupted, without at least being immediately distorted. And you've given them the best possible opportunity to see where you're coming from. So I think if having the conversation isn't working, sometimes writing the letter is a second option that could have positive effects. I can think of a conversation I was recently having with someone where I was pointing out that they were lying to me, that they had previously told me something and they're now making a completely different claim, therefore they were lying. And instead of addressing the fact that they were lying, they continuously said things to me like, "You're being so judgy, you sound judgmental," and so on. Now that might be more of an ad hom, saying that I'm judgy, making a comment about my character, as opposed to addressing the fact that I've pointed out that they've lied to me. But at the same time, this also is sort of a straw man in the sense that instead of directly addressing what I'm saying, which is that you're a liar, they're now trying to change the course of the conversation into something about me being judgmental. It's almost as if they're attacking some position, as if I said, I'm not a judgmental person. This is what they're arguing against. It would make sense if I said, I'm not judgmental. And they're saying, no, I think you are judgmental. But I was just saying, no, you've told a lie here. And so to basically avoid having to address this uncomfortable fact, they can now divert the situation into a conversation on whether or not I'm judgmental. And in this case, I simply said to the person, well, yes, I am being judgy. I am judging you. I don't like when people lie to me and you've told me a lie. So sometimes when people use ad hom attacks, or might even some sort of, you could say it's a straw man in some sense, that they attempt to divert your position to something else to change the direction of the conversation. Perhaps that's a different fallacy. I'll have to get to that in another video. But sometimes it's best to just accept the ad hom attack, to accept the sort of distortion with the straw man and say, okay, I see what you're saying there, but let's get back to what my original point is. And can you please address this point? We'll get to what you were saying here later. We can have the conversation on whether or not I'm judgmental later. But how about we go back to this original point? And sometimes you just have to stay consistent in pointing in the direction of what your actual statement is, and to sort of force the opponent to address this. Now, the way this can also play out in your own mental health, when it's not necessarily in regards to communicating with others, is that we can set up these straw men against ourselves. So it's similar to the ad hom attacks that we can make against ourselves, in the sense that maybe we failed in some way. Maybe the last 5 times that we attempted to complete a project, we didn't complete it for some reason. And then we might have a thought, we might tell ourselves, man, I'm a complete failure. I'll never be able to accomplish any project ever. And so in a sense, we've created a straw man of our own position, which the original position is, I did not succeed in completing this project the last few times. That might be a fact. But the straw man is then taking that and saying, I will never be able to complete not only this project, but any other project. And then you might say, I'm a failure. I'm no good. I don't have any value. It could, who knows where the negative thought pattern can go from there. So be careful in your own way of communicating with yourself that you don't take certain facts that you've failed in some way. You failed one day, one time, even 5 times or 10 times, but that you don't take that and then sort of make up an extreme position that you're then trying to battle with yourself on. That you're then trying to dispute the notion that you will always fail at everything because you failed in one area at one particular time. So be fair in the way you communicate with others, but also be fair in the way you communicate with yourself. Do your best to interpret your opponent's position in a fair way. And do your best to interpret your own life, your own decisions, your own self-worth. Give yourself a fair interpretation as well. And through this, you might be able to better develop your own perspective. Your opinions may become stronger. And as your opponent attempts to destroy your perspective by turning your opinions into a weak, easily defeated straw man, you actually learn to better defend your positions so that even an opponent using the straw man fallacy cannot defeat what you know to be true and what you have the ability to thoroughly back up without needing to use any fallacies at all.
Does anybody need another $1 million movie? Does anybody need another $1 million star? Does anybody need to be told over and over? Spitting in the wind comes back at you twice as hard. Starman, going straight to the devil. Starman, going straight to hell. Starman, going straight to the devil. Starman.